Hello and welcome to Reaching for the Moon, presented by Everglades Moon Local Council, Florida chapter of Covenant of the Goddess. COG supports individual works by its covens, members, and local councils. It's a vibrant network of a myriad of Wiccan and witchy resources, religious support, friendships, service opportunities, and more. To find out more, visit our website, emlc.net, our Facebook page, facebook.com/EvergladesMoon, or Twitter, @EMLCTweets.
Hello everyone, this is Lady Bridget, and welcome to episode 25 for Mabon 2016. We're going to start our podcast by joining Qabal, who's bringing us Foodoo, and this time he's going to teach us how to make the French dessert called Tarte Tartin. I'm probably saying it wrong, but it sounds delicious, and it's made with apples and puff pastry. This is followed by Mama Gina's song, Hummingbirds, which is from her album Goddess Kissed. You can learn more about Mama Gina and purchase her music at mamagina.com. After that, Lord Riekin and myself will have a discussion about how we became accidental beekeepers, kind of accidentally on purpose, and talking about our bee adventures so far. And that will be followed by the song by Emerald Rose called Rage of the Butterfly, which can be found on their album Sunwise. I just want to say something about the background noises you might hear during the podcast. We have birds, and oftentimes you can hear Tweezer especially, because he has a very loud chirp. He's our pineapple conure. He always wants to be where we are. And even though we find the most soundproof room at the other end of the house, he can still hear us. And so occasionally you will hear him. I try very hard to edit out most of the bird noises, but unfortunately we can't get them all. Doesn't bother me. In fact, we don't even hear it anymore. But if it bothers you, I do apologize. But hopefully you're bird lovers like us, and you don't mind the occasional cheap twerp and tweet. So happy Mabon, everyone, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Blessed be. Before we start the podcast, I'm going to do a really quick plug. We never have commercials, but this time I'm going to do one. And this is for our Turning the Tides event. Everglades Moon Local Council is so proud. We've been doing this event in early December for 10 years. This is our 10th year now. And this year's Yule in the Twilight is the theme. And we hope to see you in Miami in December, which is a wonderful time to visit because it is beautifully cool. The weather is normally perfect. It's going to be December 9th through December 11th. And I will not give you the exact location until you register. But trust us, it is a lovely little slice of park in Miami. And we have cabins, so you don't have to schlep all your tenting and camping equipment. And we have food, and it is a 3-day celebration. Workshops are now open. Registrations are now open, and you can register online at emlc.net. Early bird registration is $55, and early bird registration ends November 26th. And that's really important because after November 26th, registration increases to $80. So please give us a look on emlc.net. Check out Turning the Tides, Yule in the Twilight, our 10th year anniversary celebration. And now we return to your regularly scheduled program.
So happy Mabon, which is actually one of my favorite holidays. Not really that you'd know it from my voice or the happiness that comes from school starting again and all the grading and complaining about work and the committee meetings that are endless as they tell you about some minute detail that requires massive attention and is apparently super important but will be changed next week and forgotten in the midst of time in just a few short months. Anyway, happy Mabon, and it's that start of apple season here in the Northern Hemisphere. A part of the world that we barely hang on to in Florida, but we do get apples and more apples at the store, and there is now a huge selection of apples that is available to us. So I thought it would be interesting to go over an apple recipe and some of the different types of apples that we have access to and their uses, as well as an amazing classic dessert, all without ever mentioning pumpkin spice. And why is it called pumpkin spice when it has no pumpkin in it? And I have to tell you pumpkin spice hummus, which is an abomination, and pumpkin spice Pop-Tarts and pumpkin spice popcorn. So I thought it would be good to go over a bit of science of pumpkin spice for a moment to vent my specific gratitude at its existence. So Lesnie and Venkatesan, 1989, published a paper in the Association for Consumer Research titled Reactance Theory in Consumer Research, the Past, Present, and Future. It discussed the social psychological roots of something called freedom restriction from the earlier work of psychologist Jack Brem, and how telling people they can only have something for a brief period of time makes them crave it even more. And it was field tested, get ready, in Miami and Tampa in 1972. You see, there was a developing ban on phosphates in detergents. You might be thinking, what? But phosphates pollute lakes and streams, so it's important. Think bad algae. Back to the ban. So while products were still available in Tampa but banned in Miami, researchers assessed opinion on desire for phosphates in detergents in both cities. Even though people in Miami knew they didn't want the phosphates, they still rated products with them more favorably than people in Tampa only because they no longer had access to them. In other words, because it was no longer available, people wanted it even more. So, and you know where this is going, tell people pumpkin spice is available in fall, even though the syrup is available year-round. No, really it is. You can get it any time. People crave it. All because the weather is turning lovely and pumpkin spice wasn't advertised yesterday. Add sugar, which makes our brains ecstatic, and you have a Now, for those who still think it's the yummiest thing, here's the recipe. It's a proportional recipe, which means you can put it together in parts, teaspoons, for example. Pumpkin spice is 6 parts cinnamon, 1 part nutmeg, 1 part ginger, half part allspice, half part cloves. Mix it up, stir and store as you wish, and add sugar for the home run effect. So back to apples. The apple varieties that I usually find in the grocery store, or the ones that are most common for me, are Golden Delicious, Granny Smith, Fuji, Macintosh, Pink Lady, Red Delicious, Rome, and Honeycrisp. Now, the thing about these is that they have different uses, each one, and so some of it has to do with our own personal tastes, but in addition to that, some of them have been grown to be better as a pie, or be better for baking. Some of them are better for sauces. So the Golden Delicious is actually a pretty good all-around apple, and it makes very good pies, baking sauce. It makes somewhat less favorable juice, but people still like it. Granny Smith, of course, is tart and sweet, and it is another good all-around apple for cooking. It's actually ideal in salads. It makes good juice, but of course it's going to be tart. The Fuji apple is a sweet, crisp, very juicy apple, and it really is better raw as well as for sauce. It's less ideal for baking, partly because it has so much juice in it that it's hard to bake the apple until it gets nice and firm. The Macintosh apple is less firm, and this is one of the apples that's actually not good for baking. It's not good for pies. It's good eating raw, and it can be good for sauce as well as juice. The Pink Lady apple is a sweet, crisp apple, and this is a good all-around apple, and it actually is the one that's ideal for sauces. The Red Delicious apple is personally a bland apple. I have no idea why it even exists. It should not be used for cooking at all. It does not hold up well. Most people enjoy it raw. For those who enjoy Red Delicious, I think it's actually somewhat a grainy apple. Anyway, the Rome, or what's called the Rome Beauty, is a sweet, firm apple, and it's ideal for pies as well as sauce. It can be used in baking. It's good for juice, and it's good raw, but it really is best for baking. And finally, the Honeycrisp, which is an all-around excellent apple. It can be used in anything, though I think that Honeycrisp is one of the best eating apples, personally, so I don't use it for anything other than eating raw. Anyway, so now to our simple recipe that highlights the apples. It's the French recipe, the Tarte Tartin. It's a French upside-down pastry with caramelized butter and sugar as its base. It's actually super easy and super dangerous, just like potions. It has 4 ingredients, and it is exceptionally simple and an exceptionally elegant dessert. What you need is about 6 to 8 large apples. I think Granny Smith are the best for this because I personally like the tartness, but if you prefer another apple, go ahead with that one. But again, avoid the Red Delicious because they can turn very mealy in cooking. You need about 6 tablespoons of butter. The salted butter works for this. You can use unsalted butter, just add a pinch of salt. And you need about 2/3 cup of light brown sugar. And 1 sheet of store-bought puff pastry. You can find this stuff in the refrigerated sections at the grocery store, usually next to the frozen fruit. So, on to the recipe. It starts off the day before. Peel, core, and quarter your apples and place them in a bowl lined with a few sheets of paper towels. The apples will turn brown, but they're going to turn brown in cooking anyway. So it's really a who cares moment. Just let them turn brown if they need to turn brown. The point is that when you put a cover on it like a plate and then you refrigerate it at about 24 hours, you're going to be removing a lot of the excess liquid that's in the apple, which makes them easier to cook and makes them firmer at the end of cooking. So it really is a step that you want to do. You can actually do this up to 3 days beforehand, but they all, of course, have to be refrigerated. When you're ready to cook, preheat the oven to 375 degrees and let it go for 30 minutes after it reaches temperature. In other words, you want to preheat the oven, let the oven temperature go off and tell you that it's ready, and then don't believe it, wait 30 minutes before you're ready to cook. Now, in a heavy oven-proof skillet, that's about 10 inches in diameter, add the sugar and butter and smear it over the bottom so that you get a nice layer of that sugar butter mixture. Then place an apple quarter in the center and then start making concentric rings with the apple pieces. And you can make whatever design you want. You can make a spiral, a sunflower, a banshee head, whatever you want. Just keep the pieces tightly close together. Now, on a work surface, cut a 10-inch circle of that puff pastry so that it fits neatly over the skillet and over the apples. Now, there's a pro tip here. You want to cut that pastry with a super sharp knife. Any dull knife actually presses into the pastry, and so that section won't rise as well as it should. So a super sharp knife will give you a clean cut and not press it in. Don't use anything like a pizza cutter. Again, that super sharp knife will just cut through the pastry rather than press it down and cut it. Now put the pastry on top of the apples that are on top of the sugar and butter mixture. Put the skillet on the stove top and turn it on for medium heat for about 5 minutes until you see some light brown bubbling. Then keep cooking for about another 3 to 4 minutes. After about 3 or 4 minutes or so, you should start seeing some dark bubbling down at the bottom. In other words, you need 5 minutes, and then you need about 3 to 4 minutes. No more than 5 minutes. Once you have that brown bubble, the skillet goes in the oven for 45 minutes until the puff pastry is golden brown and firm. Now, the last step, take it out of the oven and let it cool for 5 minutes. Meanwhile, get a small bowl and fill it with water and some ice. Now, get your serving plate, put it on as a cover on the skillet, and flip the whole thing out. It will be very hot, so please be careful. That hot sugar is even more dangerous. If you get burned, dip your hand immediately into that ice water bowl. That's why it's there. You don't need it for cooking. You need it as your safety tool should you get any hot sugar on your hand. It is very dangerous, so seriously be careful. If any apples get stuck, peel them off with a spoon and put them where they go in the pattern that you had. If anyone complains about the apple being stuck, well then stop feeding them. The Tarte Tartin is served warm and goes great with vanilla ice cream or drizzled with sugared heavy cream that has a dash of vanilla. It really is a great and elegant dessert and an excellent way to celebrate the holiday. Happy Mabon.
Wings so fast that I can't see them. Beauty makes me hold my breath. I am here, don't know the reason. Maybe it's some kind of test. Hummingbirds and things with wings that all need time and space. Fragile hearts seek honey and a special kind of grace. Love so big that I can't hold it. My arms can't reach around the whole of you. Origami heart, just let me fold it. Put it in my pocket, take it home a night or two. Hummingbirds and fragile hearts are stronger than we seem. Always taking chances and slipping in that stream. A star so bright I almost lost it. Had to look away to see it clear. Can we agree to stand in awe and wonder? Make our way in love and set aside our tears. Hummingbird, she knows the sky is oh so grand, and still it holds her gently like the heart that's in your hand. Hey, yeah. Can we be hummingbirds and fly? I wanna be a hummingbird. Heart so true, I must believe it. Beauty makes me breathe a silent sigh. Sky so vast and I don't fear it. Hey, do you remember how to fly? Hummingbird, she knows the sky is oh so grand, and still it holds her gently like the hearts within our hands. Hey, I wanna be a hummingbird. Fly. Can we be hummingbirds? Yeah. I wanna be a hummingbird.
This is Lady Bridget.
And this is Lord Riekin.
And we're going to tell you about how we became beekeepers.
Keeping bees has been a topic of conversation for some years around here, but the logistics just weren't there because we were running an active coven. There just wasn't enough room both to have bees in the backyard and to have our coven space. We weren't bothered by it, but other people could be. And if you don't know this, we learned it by accident.
Oh, yeah.
The story will be told in more detail later on, but we learned that bees will kamikaze into candles until we decided it was time to retire and no longer have an active coven that would meet in the backyard.
We still have an active coven. We just don't meet in the backyard.
Don't meet in the backyard anymore, yeah. The backyard space is now committed to keeping bees more than anything else. It's still our personal sacred space because we don't mind sharing it with the bees, but we have to assume that other people might have a problem with that. Like I said, we have been intending to keep bees for many years. We were just waiting for the right time, I guess.
And this is a good time to throw in why we wanted to keep bees.
Well, we wanted to keep bees primarily, believe it or not for honey production, not for wax production. We wanted to keep a hive of bees simply to provide a safe space for bees.
Yeah. And we know that the backyard is pretty conducive to bees.
Yeah.
And the honey and the wax is really nice to have too, be honest.
Well, yes, but they're not the primary focus. I'm not using a beekeeping method that maximizes honey production. And I'm using a beekeeping method that kind of maximizes beeswax production. I'll grant you that.
But it is better for the bees.
But it's better for the bees. It's more natural. Particularly when I found out that there were more natural ways to keep bees than the pattern that I had a little bit of experience with. I used to help a beekeeper friend of mine on occasion, and it just seemed like way too much work the way it was done to produce for the commercial market. And we were kind of thinking about it. Things were moving closer to it, and then one day a swarm landed in the avocado tree. And okay, a swarm lands. Usually they rest overnight and they go on their merry way.
Yeah, we've had a couple of swarms that rested overnight. One rested overnight in the garbage can, as I recall, the can that you used to keep sticks and stuff in. And then I got really excited when that happened, and then the next day they left.
Yeah. More often than not, the scouts have found themselves a place, or the scouts are still out actively looking for a place for the new hive, but the swarm has to rest somewhere at night. But this swarm stayed for 1 day, then it stayed for 2 days, and it stayed for 3 days. And if it stays for 3 days, then you have to go, And at that point, when that swarm stayed up there for 3 days, it had taken me by surprise. And I went ahead and ordered a top bar hive from a gentleman on eBay. And I was crossing my fingers, but by the time the hive got here, we'd had a brutal storm.
Rain.
Pounding rain, high winds mostly. And the next day after the rain, the swarm was gone. But they had been intending to stay because the whole branch where they were was covered with wax and propolis. And, they had started to establish themselves. So I was very unhappy about that. But the hive came after another week or so, and I put the hive together and started learning a little bit more. I chose the top bar method because it's much more natural for the bees. Well, about a week after that, we had circle in the backyard.
Oh, that's right.
And that's when we found out that bees kamikaze into candles, and you just can't stop them. We knew there was a hive there around there somewhere, so I started looking.
So during circle, we have the candles lit, where we have the outside altar, and we have them covered with glass chimneys that are open to the top so that the wind can't blow the candles out. Then the next thing we know, there's a bee buzzing around the goddess candle. And we're like, oh, wow, that's so cool. Look at the bee buzzing around the goddess candle. Oh, no, look at the bee going into the goddess candle. Oh, no, the bee went into the flame and killed itself. And we're like, oh, that's terrible. And then the next thing we know, there's 2 more bees. And then there's more bees. And we're like, uh-oh, this is not good. Luckily, we were getting close to the end of circle. So we were going to be putting the candles out anyway, but we kind of figured out that, the hive probably didn't leave the vicinity like we thought they had when they left the avocado tree. They must have found someplace else to go that was close by, at least close enough for the candlelight to attract them at night, because usually, from our research, bees don't fly around at night. They, go in the hive and sleep. So they were coming out because they were seeing the light, which meant they must be close by. And the second thing we learned was, if we're going to have bees in the backyard, we are not going to have candles in the backyard.
So at any rate, the next day I started looking around, and much to my astonishment, we found the bee. They had moved into one of the pillars. Anyone who's been in our backyard knows that I have 2 hollow fiberglass pillars set up at the entrance of our circle, one painted black and one painted white.
Like the pillars on the High Priestess card in the tarot.
Yeah.
And they're hollow and they're tall.
Yes. Planted in the ground, they're 9 feet tall, above ground. And I don't really look at the top of them at all. And the top is hollow and it's simply cut off. And apparently they moved in there. And I got up on a ladder, and I wasn't going to climb up high enough to stick my face over there, but I stuck my cell phone over there, took some pictures and looked at the pictures, and they were attached to the sides of the pillar building comb.
Which is a problem because we can't reach them.
Yeah, the only way that we could access them would be to dig that post up, which is planted several feet in the ground, lay it down on its side, and then I wouldn't have a clue what to do. I read and researched and didn't help much. And what I did learn is that the temperature gets much above 95. It's a good chance that the hive will actually, or rather the comb will detach from the side of the hive, or the side of the post. And this was in the spring, and I knew that every day was going to be hotter than the day before. Well, anyway, the first thing I did, though, was I took a bucket that was just large enough, since they were open to the weather, I took a bucket that was just large enough to fit over the top of the post. I cut access holes and ventilation holes in it and such, and I capped the post with it so that they had a nice environment to move back and forth in. They had ventilation, and they did seem to appreciate that. They thrived in there for another month and a half or so until it got so hot. Well, they died. The hive died because it just baked in the heat.
It was too hot for them.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, they never actually moved into the big hive that you put so conveniently close by. I never understood why they didn't just move into the
Well, we didn't
hive.
know at that time to do something like, actually I put the hive on a ladder right next to it. In fact, I put a hole in the bottom of the hive at one point, an inch diameter hole in the bottom of the hive, and I set the hive on top of the post so that they had to move through the hive.
And they still didn't move into the hive.
And they still didn't move into the hive. It just wasn't meant to be with that particular swarm of bees. Things ended there for the time being, and I took for the first time ever, they offered the bee college that fall down here in Florida, in South Florida, and I took a day off work and I went to the bee college, as did Raina and Kanu, and we learned things there. I was gifted with a bee trap by the South Florida Backyard Beekeepers Association, Florida Backyard Beekeepers Association.
So that's another good tip, by the way, is if you're thinking about keeping bees, you have to do some research first.
Yeah, monetarily speaking, it's very expensive to buy bees. And while you might be better off right at the beginning, that is, you'll be getting a queen of some known genetics, that won't last long. You're going to end up with queens that are more the local genetics, whatever those genetics are. Anyway, so you're better off trapping a swarm, and traps are easy to build and inexpensive.
Well, I was going in a kind of a different direction with that.
Okay.
I was thinking more like it's better to go to a local beekeepers association and pick their brains. Being able to talk to somebody who's actually doing it in the area where you live. And there are beekeeping associations in a lot of areas, right?
Yeah. I've found that the beekeeping community has been wonderful about putting everything online. I have not come up with a specific problem yet that I was not able to find 10 videos on that answered all my questions.
Well, that's
that
awesome.
All being said, going about it that way, you can also take a lot of Beekeeper 101 courses online, but going about it that way is kind of hodgepodge. I am scheduled next weekend to spend 4 hours with the Palm Beach County Beekeepers Association at a hands-on Beekeeper 101 in the President's backyard with a group of at least 40 other people to learn some of the basics. What I really need to learn more than anything else is how to properly inspect the comb, because as many videos on that as you will find online, they simply can't focus in tight enough with their cameras to really teach you what you need to know. I need to know how to inspect a hive and, without finding the queen, know whether or not I have a laying queen in there, whether she's a productive queen or a non-productive queen, this sort of thing. There's no substitute for hands-on training. There really isn't.
Hence my statement about finding a beekeepers association in your area.
Yes, there's still huge value in that.
But I think you left off where in the
We
story
left off where the
you got
hive,
gifted with a bee trap.
Right. Well, because the hive sitting out there had done nothing, then I got gifted with a bee trap that had some lemongrass oil, in it and such. And so I happily painted that all up and activated it and set it out, and nothing happened for like 6 or 8 months. We didn't catch a swarm.
And one of our friends also gifted us with a little bit of comb, actual bee comb.
Yes, Manny gifted us with a little bit of fresh bee comb. Well, that was when we started seeing, well, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. We did get a swarm in the bee trap eventually. And then I found out again that I had not properly prepared myself because I hadn't gotten a beekeeping suit yet. And these bees were native, so they were a little more rambunctious, and I wasn't going to do too much without a bee suit. So I got my bee suit ordered, and my frames were all set up and all this, and everything I'd seen online, I thought that in 2 to 3 weeks I'd be looking at some maybe palm-sized pieces of comb in there. So I wasn't worried about any of that. I had failed to consider just how productive South Florida can be at the right time of year in terms of pollen and nectar production. And by the time the bee suit got here and everything was set up
it was like
and ready to go,
5 weeks.
It was probably like 5 weeks. And even at that, I wasn't terribly worried about anything. We took the bee trap down early that morning. We opened it up, and I pulled out a solid cube of comb going in 6 different directions. The hardest thing, of course, is when you realize that your trap was going to be around long enough for there to be comb that you had, particularly using a top bar hive, that you had to make certain specific adjustments and preparations, which when they were all made, we did this. And I did graft this mass of comb onto top bars and put them into my hive.
Yep.
With some success, not knowing how to identify the different things I need to identify. I left them with way too much drone. I took way too much pupae out. But at any rate, they survived. They overcame my stupidity. And
our ignorance didn't kill
them. My
them.
ignorance did not destroy the hive. And the hive started. But very soon thereafter, and there were at least 10 bee cups in there, so they had already been starting to swarm like crazy. But we got I have a smaller hive I built after I got the first hive, and we got it out there in time to catch a swarm from the hive.
So
and
now
we're off and running. We have 2 hives, one which had been brutalized and is recovering and producing well. The other one is just going gangbusters.
Yeah.
Well, we have bees. There be bees in this backyard.
Which we're actually really happy about. And I want to tell you, when Riekin got his bee suit, it's white. You kind of look like something from outer space in it. You look like one of the astronauts because it's got like a helmet kind of thing, and it's framed with netting. So, and then you have these really long gloves that go over everything, and the suit he got
it's an overall.
Covers your entire body, and it's all one piece. So, I wanted to film him moving the bees because I was totally fascinated, and I've never seen this done in person. And I wanted to be able to film it. So I put it on, I just used my cell phone. I didn't even use a really exotic camera or anything. I didn't want to get stung. So I used my cloak. I put on a hat with a wide brim. I took a net bag that we usually use camping to put dirty clothes in, and I threw that over my hat and tucked it down under my cloak and found a pair of long gloves that I must have worn to prom 25, well, I'm lying, however many years ago that would have been. I found them in the back of my drawer. I think I still had them for part of a Halloween costume or something. And that was my bee suit. So I put those up on the Facebook page, and I put a little bit up of the video on our Facebook page. But I do intend to download the entire hour-and-a-half long video that I took of moving the hive out of the bee trap and into the bigger top bar hive. We started actually before dawn because the bees are asleep. I was surprised to find out that you don't want to do it during the day because some of the bees are out hunting or
Foraging deer.
foraging. Sorry, yeah, that's the right word. Foraging, or they're out scouting, or whatever bees do when they're out of the hive. And if you move the hive while they're out, they won't know where the hive is. Even if it's only like 4 feet away, they're going to buzz around where it used to be and be all confused. So you really have to do it while everybody's sleeping. And then there's this thing you use called a smoker, right?
Yeah.
Because bees communicate by pheromones. And so without the odors, without the pheromones, the smoke kind of calms them, and it also stops the communication. So nobody gets the signal to sting. Nobody gets the signal to swarm out. Nobody gets the danger signal. They're just like, oh, something's going on. Well, I'm not getting a danger signal, so it must be okay. And you can actually move them around quite often, quite a bit. And then when they start to get a little more active, you need to kind of smoke them a little bit more, but you got to be careful. You don't want to over smoke them. But this hive, we were lucky. They were very calm. I was kind of amazed at how calm they were. I've only seen cartoon hives, so I or things on YouTube, which I find a little scary also. But this wasn't scary at all. I was quite surprised at how calm the bees were, and I felt very safe, and I didn't feel like I was in any danger of being stung, or that you were either. I was really surprised.
Yeah, well, this is the beginning of a long journey. We're accidental beekeepers. We've been at it now actively for 3 or 4 months. And it's the beginning of a long journey that's very fascinating. And there's a tremendous amount to learn.
And I'm actually very jealous that you're going to go to the bee college next weekend.
Aw, poor baby. Well, you're off on a cruise.
I'll be on a cruise.
Yeah.
Which is the only reason why I'm not going with you, because I'm already going on a cruise. But to be honest, I am jealous, because I would have really loved to go with you for that particular course. But I will try to make the best of it.
Well, I have technically already joined the Palm Beach Beekeepers Association, and I will try to make it up there every month to their meetings, because, my very first meeting up there was absolutely the perfect meeting, because it was all about a guy who goes to Haiti and teaches beekeepers there. And their conditions are very similar to ours. And the Palm Beach County Beekeepers Association has probably the single most valuable piece of information on their website. They have a calendar of beekeeping for South Florida. To learn such things as the fact that right now, at this moment, we're in the honey dearth, or rather the nectar dearth at the moment. There's very little, relatively speaking, blooming in South Florida at this moment. Very soon the Florida holly will start blooming and everything will go nuts again. I was a little worried about my one hive because they just look all beat down, but I learned that I can feed them some sugar water, and boy, you should have seen that hive perk up.
I should have taken a little bit of a video for that.
Yeah, but so every few days I'm giving them a quart of honey water, or sugar water, I should say, with some apple cider vinegar in it, and they're just loving that.
Yeah,
they were loving that all to bits.
They were all over that jar.
And you could just see the energy level of the hive go up when that was going on.
They needed a little bit of food.
They needed a little perk up, because we happen to be at a rough time for them at the moment. It'll change here very shortly.
Well, everything's really hot, and it's really wet, and nothing's really blooming.
That's part of it. We've had so much torrential rain here for the last week and a half. They can't be out foraging much during that time. Anytime we have one of these day-and-a-half rains, I'm putting out extra sugar water for them to make sure that they don't go dipping into their stock too much.
Yeah. So don't get the wrong impression, because the bees don't do it all by themselves. They need a little help. They need a little assistance, and they appreciate a little assistance. What they don't appreciate, this is something else that we had to learn. They don't appreciate other pets. They don't appreciate ants, frogs, lizards, and kids poking around in their hive. If you're going to look into keeping bees, you do want to research whether or not you have the right area on your property to put a beehive. You want to research what kind of flight line the bees require in order to get in and out of the hive, in order to get in and out of the area, because they are going to be flying around. They're going to be looking for food sources. So you also want to know, do you live in an area where nobody has a garden, or do you live in an area where there's food sources available, like fruit trees and things that are going to be blooming at different times of the year that the bees are going to want to have. You also want to double check for the ordinances in the state where you live as to whether or not...
I mean the city where you live, dear.
Well, the state, the county, and the city. You want to research your statutes. You want to find out if you're allowed to have bees. Do you need a permit? If so, how many hives are you allowed to have? What kind of property lines do you have to have? Do you actually have to go around and to ask your neighbors? And this may be a big concern, because if you go around and ask your neighbors, you may find that they all say yes, and then all of a sudden they start complaining that, oh, my kid got stung, and you don't even have a hive yet. So sometimes you don't want to put that bug in their ear. I know we actually did not say anything to our neighbors, and our neighbors are a little bit on the close side, but if you Google our yard from Google Earth and you look down, we look like we live in a jungle, because our yard is just completely filled with fruit trees and blooming butterfly gardens and things like that. And not that we don't have any open spaces, because we do, because we obviously have the circle space in the backyard. I have a space where I keep the camper. We have space in the front yard and the side yard. We live on a corner lot, so the bees have an open flight line right out of the yard that doesn't have to cross anybody else's property, that doesn't have to cross by where people are going to be swimming or having cookouts. And our pool area is completely enclosed by screen. So even though we can have the bees close, they're not going to get into the pool area and bother anybody that's in the pool.
More concerned than drowning.
Well, yeah, and the bees aren't going to drown. They also do need a water source. You found that out too.
Yeah.
So they need a little bit of water nearby. You can provide that yourself if you don't have, a running stream or something. The research is totally doable on the internet. Look for a beekeepers association in your area so you can pick their brains. Go to their meetings and learn about it. Do your research first. I don't think we did enough research before we actually started this.
You have to know what questions to ask, and I didn't know enough to know what questions to ask.
Well, that's true. But we definitely were getting signs from the goddess that our yard was a good space for bees, because we kept having hives come and stay overnight, and then that one that stayed in the avocado tree, and then that hive moved into the pillars, and it was like, okay, we wanted bees, and the goddess is sending us bees. Now what do we do with them? How do we keep them? How do we take care of them? How do we provide the best environment for them? So I guess this might be an ongoing conversation for future podcasts as we learn a little bit more and continue on the journey. Do you have future plans for the hives?
Yes. I started with top bar hives. They're less expensive. They're less technology involved. They're more natural for the bees. They have some drawbacks, particularly if you want to keep a sustainable hive. I won't go into all that right now. And my continuing and ongoing research, particularly given how quickly our hives down there are likely to generate extra queen cells and swarm, has led me to want to build a slightly different kind of hive than the ones I have. And I'm in that process now. I had to start by ordering a whole bunch of what we call Langstroth frames and put them together. I won't be using prepared comb in them. I'll be working them like a top bar in some sense, but I'm going to make what's called a horizontal Langstroth after the Russian model.
So there's a lot to learn.
There's a lot to learn. A Langstroth hive, each box has either 8 or 10 combs in it. My box is going to have 30 combs in it, actually 31 combs in it. And with that size of hive, I should be able to leave a core undisturbed and yet constantly move frames in and out, harvest honey, harvest wax, provide them with more than enough room to continue growing, that they're not pressured to swarm, and just keep them very sustainably there.
Well, let me ask you a question. When a hive swarms, does the whole hive leave? Or
No,
does part of the hive leave?
No, what happens is the old queen Of course, they've made a queen cup. They've raised new queens. And the new queen comes out, and the old queen takes approximately half the hive with her. And the old queen, mind you, takes half the hive with her and goes out looking for a new location and leaves the young queen in position. The problem with that, remember I just said she takes about half the hive with her.
Yeah.
Okay, if you have too much pressure to swarm because you don't have enough space, you could have 3 or 4 queens successfully coming out, and you take half, and then you take half again, and then take half again, and take half again. You get to a point where there aren't enough bees to take care of the brood that are still left in the hive.
And the bees will actually do that?
Yes, they will.
They'll keep leaving and following the old queen?
They'll keep leaving and following whoever the head queen at that moment was. And, you do that 4 times, and you don't have enough bees to take care of the brood, much less bees to go out and bring in the nectar and the pollen. The pollen is the bee food, after all, and the nectar is used for the rearing of the young, and you start a downward spiral that they can't recover from. And you get to a point where they can't defend the hive against raiders and everything else.
So you kind of have to keep an eye on how many queens they're raising.
That's why you do have to inspect a hive from time to time. This hive style that I want to build now, supposedly, you only have to check it twice a year. That's fine in other parts of the country, but still, given our productivity down here, I'm sure I'm going to have to check it every couple of months at least, because I'm going to need to be on the lookout for too much drone. I have to be on the lookout for queen cells and everything else. And if I wanted to have 20 hives, I could have 20 hives probably inside of 2 years, the way swarms go down here. I need to keep my hive numbers at less than 3. If you've been keeping count, we have 2 hives. I'm talking about building a new hive, but believe
that's
it or
3.
not, yeah, that's 3, and B, at least one of those hives, I'm probably would have to incorporate the 2 hives I have right now into making them into 1 hive, because I want to keep it down at 2, just for safety's sake. But to get a little more specific to Florida, a moment ago she was talking about different states and everything else. We now have state laws in place that supersede any city ordinances and county ordinances about beekeeping if they say you can't keep bees. For instance, Los Angeles has had a law in the books for over 100 years that you can't keep bees in the city limits. Los Angeles, California. But if we have any local ordinances that prohibit you from keeping bees, those are overturned, basically. Now, doesn't mean you can't establish rules. I live in the city of Tamarack. Tamarack's code is silent on beehives. I work in the city of Sunrise. Sunrise's code is silent on the subject of bees. Both of them indicate that as one of the things that can be termed a nuisance is bees infesting an area. I can cite people, and I do cite people, to get rid of beehives that are in the side of a building or on a big hive on a branch that's dropping chunks of hive into people's backyard. I know bees will just put out hives on a branch, because I once had to tell some people to get rid of a beehive that would have filled half of a 20-gallon trash can.
Wow.
With wax.
Wow.
I mean, it was amazing how they will just do it right out there in the open if they have to. But that is an infestation. They're silent on hives being kept because you can't consider that an infestation. So the topic hasn't come up. But if my city or if Tamarack had a rule saying, yes, you can have beehives, but you have to get a signed affidavit from your neighbors, and within 6 months of getting the hives, you have to be having inspections by the state inspectors and all that stuff, then we would have to abide by them, because that doesn't violate state law. But we have a state law now that says you cannot, no municipality or county can prohibit the keeping of bees.
And that came about because there was concern
about colony collapse.
Yeah,
Yes.
That was another factor in our wanting to keep bees. There is a real problem with colony collapse. There are issues surrounding the use of pesticides and commercial spraying. And especially now with the Zika virus, a lot of towns and municipalities are starting to spray. And if they do it during the day, your bees can be destroyed. Ours aren't doing it during the day now, but in other places, they started out doing it during the day, and there were a lot of people who lost their bees because of it.
Other states, yes.
In other states. So they have to be aware that bees pollinate your crops. Bees pollinate the orange groves in Florida, for one thing, and I know they pollinate the orange groves in California, and
the
avocados.
mango and the avocado and
yeah,
everything else.
And peaches and pecans and, you pretty much name it. I mean, there are other species of insects that also help with pollination, but bees are your major workers in that area. So the state was concerned because of the orange groves and because of the colony collapse that there weren't enough bees and that this is going to threaten Florida's economy. And that's what prompted them to pass the ordinance, isn't it?
It used to be that farms kept bees. Now farms don't keep bees. Even farmers. An interview I was listening to the other day, man pays $1,000 a year to have a beekeeper bring in 6 beehives for 6 weeks. This beekeeper was asking the farmer, it's like, look, for an investment of less than half of that, you can have 6 hives on your own property year round. You can have the benefits of the honey and the wax and everything, and you wouldn't have to pay for going forward. Why wouldn't you want this win-win-win? And the farmer thought about it for a moment, shook his head and said, no, I'd rather pay somebody to do it. The number of beekeepers in the United States has dropped dramatically. In Europe, the same way. Everybody's gone to commercial because beekeeping has gotten to be so technical that everybody figures it's too complicated. And there have been times in my life when I've been helping my beekeeper friend that I thought the same thing, because I was helping him constantly restack, remove, disrupt these bees. You have to take the brood on the bottom and put it as the second super, and then you have to put supers on top of that. There's every 2 weeks you're out there rotating and moving, and it's like, man, this is awfully complicated. It wasn't until more recently I found out, you know what, it doesn't have to be that complicated.
They make it complicated because that's how they want to do it.
That's how they maximize honey production.
For commercial purposes.
For commercial purposes.
Right. And since we're not doing that, we can pretty much let the bees do their own thing and just kind of monitor to make sure that they're safe and that they're healthy and they don't need any help.
Yeah. Now, the state of Florida and the municipalities and such all understand that to spray for the Zika virus, you should spray at night. In Broward County so far, all we're spraying is Bacillus thuringiensis, which is no problem to the bees at all. It is a bacteria that gets into the water. It's a dunk. I don't know if any of you know what a dunk is. It looks like a donut, and if you have a green backyard pool, you throw one dunk in, and what the dunk is made of is Bacillus thuringiensis. They simply, as soon as they get hydrated, they attack mosquito larvae and they kill them. And you can spray that, so all these little water sources, like all of our bromeliads that we have everywhere in South Florida, that all have a little cup of water in it, well, that's perfect breeding grounds for the Egypti mosquito. But a little bit of thuringiensis in there, and you're good to go. So far, Broward County's only sprayed thuringiensis. They're actually spraying the actual chemicals that knock down the mosquito in flight in Dade County. But there are phone numbers that you can call that you have to be notified if they're getting ready to spray in your area. And they do this at night. So if you're notified the day before, or even if they notify 8 or 9 o'clock at night, if you have backyard bees, you can go out, throw a sheet over the bees, and the next morning at dawn, you can take the sheet off the bees, and you're pretty well good to go. You won't have any real problem. You just don't want any of the chemical to rest on the landing space on your hive and such. Because if they walk over it, you could end up with a few dozen bees dead.
And you can call your local municipalities to find out those phone numbers?
Yes. Yeah.
The bottom line here is that you want to be a responsible beekeeper. Even if you're an accidental beekeeper like us, you want to be a responsible beekeeper and find these things out, because they are going to affect your bees. For us, we're doing this more for the bees than we are for any other reason. But the honey and the wax are going to be beautiful byproducts. We love honey. I make candles. Beeswax is good for using in salves and so many other uses. It's unbelievable. But I would say if you have any interest at all and you think you have the right kind of area for it, do some research. Go online, look it up. Go to a Beekeepers Association meeting, find one in your area, find somebody who's already doing it and go pick their brains. the message that I really want to get across to people is, no, it's not that complicated. There's a lot to learn. Yes, there's a lot to learn with any process. And you know what? To me, that's part of the fun. I love learning new things. Mm-hmm. And the other part of the fun is watching the bees. We go out there and sit in the backyard, in the back circle area now on our bench, and just listen to the light humming of the bees and watch them going around to the different bushes. And it's really fun to watch when you put out the sugar water.
Yeah.
Because they're coming at the sugar water from both swarms, and sometimes the bees from each swarm are like, hey, I got here first. No, I got here first. And they have a little tussle. And then they all seem to get along anyway, and they all get a sip, and they go back to the hive with, hey, I got food. I mean, it's really fun to watch them. And, you know, they're not attacking, they're not vicious, they're not looking to sting anybody, you know.
They bounce off of you, but...
Yeah, pretty much they just kind of bounce. If they even come near me at all, they just kind of bounce off. The main message is that it's not something to be frightened of. It's not something that you can't do. It's not so technical. You don't have to buy thousands and thousands of dollars worth of equipment. It's readily available thanks to the internet, and all of the information is readily available. Go on YouTube, watch a few YouTube videos. If you have any inclination whatsoever, and you do have an area that's not going to be populated by a lot of people, or you're not going to have fires at night, you have an area that'll be suitable, I would say go for it. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah. I wouldn't mind if you had 3 hives. If we have room for them, you know, if we can support them and sustain them.
Well, like I said, a 30-frame hive is the equivalent of 3 boxes of hive. Otherwise, there are people who take that 30-frame hive like I'm going to make,
yeah,
and they make 3 separate colonies inside that one by simply having separator bars. I mean, I just intend on having half of it for honey production and half of it for bee production, and then, you know.
So wait, you can actually have more than one hive in the same box?
In the same box.
You can just like make separate entrances and close the inside so they can't reach each other?
The basic plan for what I'm going to build, that's exactly what they show.
And they don't fight?
No.
They don't try to raid each other's food?
I can't claim that never happens, but you're more likely to be getting them coming in from somewhere else. There's a lot of raiding going on. I sit 2 feet outside the front door of my hives, and I sit there and watch them for 30 minutes, and I watch them repel robber bees and wrestle them to the ground. Literally, they wrestle them, shove them. There's a pushing, shoving match. They fall off of the ledge, and then they hit the ground, and at that point, usually the robber bee gives up and flies away, and the guard bee goes back up and resumes his guard position. It's fun. It's very entertaining. It's as much fun as watching crabs underwater down in the Keys, you know, as they wrestle with each other.
Or the people that used to have an ant farm when they were kids.
Yeah, we're very boring. We entertain easily.
Well, yeah, I don't do mosh pits at the bar. I'd rather sit out and watch the bees.
Yeah.
But I guess that's why I'm a witch. To me, that's the way of life that I enjoy.
Yep.
Well, I just want to say, keep tuned for more bee updates in the future. And if you have any questions, you're probably going to want to ask Riekin, because he's really much more of an expert on it. I'm just kind of fascinated.
I'm very far from being an expert, dear.
Well, you know more than I do. But
That's not the definition of expert.
This is true. But what I'm getting at is, if you have questions, you're better off emailing Riekin, and he can be reached at riekin01@gmail.com. And if that's too complicated, you can also reach me at ladybridget@gmail.com. And then I'll just pass the questions on to him. Are there a couple of books you can recommend?
Well, Beekeeping for Dummies. Duh.
Is that seriously a good book?
Yeah.
That's not the one I've read yet.
But Beekeeping for Dummies. Top Bar Hive Beekeeping by Wyatt Mangum, Ph.D. If you're going straight the top bar way, that's pretty well everybody's Bible on that. Now, the man who says that this is his Bible has just put out a book. I haven't gotten it yet. He's a East Texas beekeeper. And
do you know his name?
Not offhand. It's Blue Sky Bees.
Blue Sky Bees
is his website.
Okay.
Blue Sky Bees. And I hear he's just put out a book, and I've got to track it down and order it. because I love his videos. I subscribe to his video channel.
So Blue Sky Bees also has YouTube
Lots
videos.
of them, yeah.
Oh,
Lots
good.
of them.
Well, I think that's a good place for people to start. You don't want to get overwhelmed with too many sources, because what I found about the internet and the YouTube videos is that once you find one source, you're gonna find links to other sources, and you're just going to keep going and digging and digging and digging.
Yeah, 3 a.m. and all this, I go in there, sit down at 8 o'clock at night to look up a topic, and next thing I know, it's 3 in the morning.
I've already gone to bed because I don't have that much stamina. So again, if you have questions, email myself, email Riekin. You can even look and email us from the website, emlc.net, from the podcast page. Let us know if you want to hear more about our bees. And let us know if you also have bee adventures that we can discuss on the air. We'd love to hear about your bee adventures, or if you keep bees, or if you're thinking about keeping bees. I might even have to start a separate bee podcast, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
I don't think that's going to happen.
We'll see how that goes.
Hi, everyone. Before we begin our last segment of this episode, we'd like to thank you for listening. Putting a podcast together is a time-consuming labor of love, but knowing that someone is listening to our hard work and hopefully gaining something from it makes it worthwhile. Would you let us know you like the podcast by going to our website at emlc.net, click on the podcast tab, and write a comment. Tell us what you like and what you'd like to hear more of on our podcast. And even better, why not leave us a rating on iTunes? Ratings help us become more visible to more people. It's not about ego, it's all about service. Thank you, and blessed be.
When the science gods are all cast down and priests and gentry rule, you can give them a scholar's warning. They will call you a heathen fool, and they say that it's not a problem. They say that we're not to blame, as they dig up another 1,000 tons and put it to the flame. But the wind and the waves are rising in the warming carbon sky, and the giant storms are spun to life. Hear the winds of chaos cry. Feel the rage of the butterfly, sound of thunder far away. Stop and wonder. Now the priests say God will save us, for death must be God's will. And the comet giants pay no heed as their treasure chests they fill. And the armies dance their dances while the children starve and die. But their bullets cannot stop the beast that rises in the sky. But the wind and the waves are rising in the warming carbon sky, and the giant storms are spun to life. Hear the winds of chaos cry. Feel the rage of the butterfly, sound of thunder from far away. Stop and wonder. Of a tiny insect, a vortex spins today. The winds of chance will grow one seed, though a million fade away. And across the warming ocean, the widening giant turns. The rough beast speaks with thunder as the blood sky, and the giant storms are spun to life. Hear the winds of chaos cry. Feel the rage of the butterfly. Sound